My 6-year-old asked me why her grandmother calls her by a different name when I'm not in the room. She asked it in the bath, holding a plastic cup, in the same voice she uses to ask why dogs can't eat chocolate. Mama, why does Nana call me Iris when you're not there? I was kneeling on the bath mat with a bottle of the detangler in my hand and I did not move for a second. Then I said, "What, sweetheart?" And Ren said it again. Exactly the same, completely unbothered, and poured water on the wall. I want to describe what that was like because it did not feel like a revelation. Nothing dramatic happened in my chest. It felt like missing a step in the dark. That specific full-body wrongness where your foot goes down and the floor isn't where it's supposed to be. And then it is. And you're fine and you're not. I said, "Just sometimes?" And my daughter said, "No, all the time." And then she asked whether we could get a hamster. I was 19 when Ren was born, and I need to give you the whole picture of what that was, because everything in this story comes out of 11 days. I met Ambrose Cadogan when I was 17 and he was 21. My own mother is not in the picture and hasn't been since I was 15. That's not a story for today, but it matters because when I married into the Cadogans at 18, I did not have anybody, and they knew it, and they were good to me, genuinely good. I'm not doing a thing here where I reveal that they were secretly cruel the whole time. They were kind to me and I love them. Ren came at 34 weeks. It was an emergency section. I had a placental abruption at 2 in the morning, and I do not remember anything between the front door of the hospital and the following afternoon. She was 3 pounds 11 ounces, and she was in the NICU for 19 days, and I came apart. That's the sentence I practiced. What actually happened is that on day 3, I stopped sleeping entirely, and on day 4, I told a nurse that the baby in the isolette wasn't mine, and that they had swapped her, and I said it with total conviction, and I said it more than once, and by that evening, I was on a psychiatric unit on a 72-hour hold, which turned into 4 days. Postpartum psychosis. That's the term. It resolves. It resolved. I have had 0 recurrence in 6 years, and I've had the same psychiatrist for 5 of them, and I am, by every measure anybody applies to these things, fine. But for 11 days, from the delivery to the day I came home, I was not a person who could sign anything, and Delphine handled it. She was there every single day. She sat with the baby, she did the paperwork, she talked to the NICU social worker, she brought Ambrose food and made him shower. When I got out, she had my house clean and a bassinet up, and she never once, not one time in 6 years, has mentioned any of it to my face. Everybody in that family says the same sentence about her, and they say it warmly, and they have said it to me at holidays for 6 years. Delphine held everything together. She did. That's the thing. She actually did. She still does, is the other thing. She watches Ren 3 afternoons a week and has since Ren was 4 months old. She bought the car seat. She pays for ballet. When I pick up an extra shift at the clinic, I'm a vet tech. We're always short. She does the school run without being asked and texts me a photo of Ren in the car. I have described her to friends as the reason my life works. Out loud, multiple times. Let me give you 2 things about Delphine so she's a person and not a diagnosis. The first is that she is genuinely, unshowily competent in a way I have never been around before. When our furnace went out in January 2 years ago, she was at my house in 40 minutes with a space heater, a phone number for a guy, and a thermos. She did not make it a story. She did not tell anyone. She has never once brought it up since. The second is that she remembers everything about Ren, not in a creepy way, in the way grandmothers are supposed to, and mostly don't. She knows which shoes rub. She knows that Ren won't eat anything that's touched a tomato, but will eat ketchup, and she has never once tried to litigate that. She keeps a drawer of Ren's clothes at her house, and it is always the right size. Always. Which anybody who has a 6-year-old will tell you requires paying attention 4 times a year forever. I used to look at that drawer and feel 2 things at once, and I could never name the second one. I can now. It's that a drawer like that is not maintained by a woman who is helping out. It's maintained by a woman who is keeping house for a child. So when a 6-year-old said the word Iris in a bathtub, my first instinct was not suspicion. My first instinct was that I was about to embarrass myself. I asked her about it 2 days later in her kitchen, and she disarmed me in under a minute. She was at the counter doing something with a colander. I said, as lightly as I could, "Hey, random thing. Ren says you call her Iris sometimes?" And Delphine went absolutely still for about a second, and then she put the colander down and turned around, and her face had gone. Just gone. She said, "Oh, Marlo." And then she told me about Iris Ann. Ambrose had a baby sister. She was born in 1993, and she died in 1994 at 14 months old of a heart thing that was operable in 2005 and wasn't in 1994. There's a photograph in the hallway that I had walked past 400 times, a baby in a yellow dress on somebody's knee, and I had never asked about it because it's the kind of photograph you don't ask about. Delphine cried in that kitchen. Properly cried, with her hand over her mouth, and said that Ren has the same hairline, and that it comes out of her sometimes and she hates it, and that she'd been trying to stop for years, and that she was so sorry, and would I please not tell Ambrose because it upsets him. I hugged her. I apologized. I actually apologized to her in her kitchen for bringing it up. I drove home feeling like a monster, and I let it go for 9 days. I want that in here, because when people hear this story, they always want to know how I didn't see it. And the answer is that she gave me a true thing. Every single word of what she said in that kitchen was true. Iris Ann existed. She died. Delphine has never gotten over it. That is all completely, verifiably true. It just wasn't the answer to the question. 9 days later, Ren corrected me about her own middle middle name in the car. We were doing the thing where I quiz her on her full name and address because she'd started going to a new after-school thing and I'm neurotic. And I said, "And what's your whole entire name?" And she said, "Ren Otili Cadogan." Correct. Good. And then she said, "But Nana says it's Iris Ann." I kept both hands on the wheel and said, "Does she?" And Ren said, "Yeah. She says that's my for real name and Ren's just what we call me." That's when it stopped being a nickname. Because a slip is a name. A slip is not a middle name. Nobody accidentally supplies a matching middle name. I had been putting off Ren's passport application for about a year because passports for minors are a nightmare and require the long-form birth certificate. So on the Monday, I went online and ordered a certified copy. 4 days later, I got an email back from Vital Records. Not a certificate, a form. It said, in effect, "Your request matched more than one record. Please specify." I read that email in the parking lot at work approximately 15 times. I called the number at the bottom and got a hold queue, and then a woman who was pleasant and unhurried and asked me for the child's name and date of birth, and then went quiet for a bit and then said, "Okay, so I'm showing two." I said, "Two what?" She said, "Two certificates of live birth. Same date, same time of birth, same facility." I said, "That's a mistake." And she said, "It might be, hun. You'd have to come in." The Vital Records is in a municipal building with a ceiling fan that doesn't work and a line. The clerk's name was Solomia, and she was about my age, and I could tell within 90 seconds that she had never had this happen before because she got someone else. They turned the monitor. 2 entries. Same date of birth. Same time, 4:52 a.m. Same hospital. Same attending physician. Record 1, Ren Otili Cadogan. Mother, Marlo Ann Cadogan, age 19. Father, Ambrose Cadogan. Informant, Marlo Ann Cadogan. Record 2, Iris Ann Cadogan. Mother, Delphine Marie Cadogan, age 52. Father, Robard Cadogan. Informant, Delphine Marie Cadogan. I looked at that screen and I could hear the broken ceiling fan and somebody's phone going off behind me in the line, and I said out loud in a municipal building, "That's my mother-in-law." And Solomia said very gently, "Ma'am, this one's filed first. Mine was filed on day 17 when I got home from the hospital and Ambrose drove me down here and I signed it at that counter with a NICU bracelet still on my wrist. Hers was filed on day 11. Here's how it's possible, and I have had a lot of time to learn this, and I'd like everybody reading to know it because I didn't. The certificate of live birth is filed by an informant. The informant is the person who provides the information. It is very often the mother. It does not have to be. There is a worksheet at the hospital and somebody fills it out and it goes to the registrar, and the registrar's job is to record what they are given, not to investigate it. Nothing on that second certificate was forged. Delphine signed her own name in the informant box. She wrote her own name in the mother box, which is a false statement, but it is a false statement she made in her own handwriting under her own name. There is no forgery anywhere in it. A hospital clerk witnessed it. A registrar recorded it. And nobody ever compared the two because nothing in that system compares them. They're two records. They both exist. They have never once been in the same room until a woman named Solomia put them on a monitor for me. 6 years. I did not do anything for 4 days after Vital Records. I want to be honest about that because I've read stories like this and the person always seems to move in a straight line and I did not. For 4 days, I went to work and came home and made dinner and let my daughter go to her grandmother's on the Wednesday afternoon because I had a shift and because if I canceled it, I would have to give a reason and because I did not have a plan. I sat in my car outside the clinic on that Wednesday at 4 o'clock, knowing exactly where my daughter was and what she was being called there, and I did nothing. That's a thing I have to carry. What broke the 4 days was a receipt. Ren came home from Delphine's on the Thursday with a sticker on her shirt, one of those cartoon bandage stickers they give out, and I asked her where she got it, and she said, "Dr. Otway, our pediatrician is Dr. Vance, has been since Ren was 2 weeks old. I have taken her to every single appointment except when I've been at work." I said, "Who's Dr. Otway, baby?" And my 6-year-old said, "My other doctor," in the tone of a person explaining something extremely obvious to an adult who should already know, and went to find the tablet. Here's what I found over the next 3 weeks, and I'm going to lay it out flat because that's how it landed on me. There is a pediatric practice across town called Otway Family Medicine. I called them and asked, as a parent, to schedule an appointment for my daughter, and gave the name Iris Cadogan and the date of birth, and the receptionist said cheerfully, "Oh, sure. When did you want to bring her in? She's been a patient there since she was 3 weeks old." 6 years of well-child visits. When I asked, carefully, in the voice of a flustered person who'd lost track, which days they usually had her in, the receptionist read some off. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. Afternoons. Those are the 3 afternoons Delphine has her. 6 years of appointments made and kept, in the exact windows when nobody would notice. There is a church cradle roll at St. Bridget's, which is Delphine's parish, not ours. We don't go. With the name on it from 2020 and a baptism date in the August. I found that one because I went looking for the funeral notice for the first Iris and got the parish's newsletter archive instead, and there was a list of that year's baptisms in a PDF, and I read a name I know better than my own on a list I had never been told about. There is a custodial savings account at a credit union out on Fenimore, opened when Ren was 5 weeks old. $14,200. Custodian, D. Cadogan. Beneficiary, I. Cadogan. I only know the balance because Delphine put a printed statement in a Christmas card 2 years ago as a gift-adjacent gesture, and I glanced at it and put it in a drawer and never looked at the name on it. Not once, because why would you look at the name? I went and got that that card out of the drawer. It took me 40 minutes to find it. The name is right there. It has been in my house for 2 years. And there is a dependent line on Delphine's employer Healthland. She works for the county. She has carried my daughter as a dependent for 6 years under a different name and has been paying a family tier premium to do it, out of her own paycheck, every 2 weeks, for 6 years. I sat on my kitchen floor with all of it printed out on the tile in front of me, laid out in rows, and I want to say I cried, but I didn't. I got extremely still and extremely cold, and I could hear my own pulse in my ears. And at some point, I noticed I'd been holding the same piece of paper long enough that it was damp where my fingers were. It wasn't a secret. That's the part that got me. Not one single piece of it was hidden. Every one of those things is an official record with her name on it, filed openly, maintained on time, premiums paid, appointments kept. She wasn't hiding a child. She was raising one, on paper, in parallel, on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays. I told Ambrose that night after Ren went down. I had it all laid out on the table. I walked him through it in order, and it took about 20 minutes, and he did not interrupt once. And when I finished, he sat back and rubbed his face and said, "Okay." I said, "Okay." He said, "What do you want me to do, Marlo?" I said I wanted him to be as horrified as I was. And my husband said, "She was doing paperwork while you were in the unit." I said, "Say that again." He said, "You know what I mean? It was 11 days. Nobody knew if the baby was going to make it. Mom did what she does, which is handle things, and she used," and he stopped. And then he said, "She used a name that's been in her head since 1994, and then she never fixed it. That's it. That's the whole thing." I said, "There's a savings account, Ambrose." And he said, "So she's saving money for her granddaughter." We went round for 2 hours. I asked him if he'd known, straight out at about midnight in our kitchen, "Did you know there were 2 certificates?" He said no, and I believe him. I have thought about that for 2 years, and I still believe him. Ambrose has never filed a piece of paper in his life. He does not know what our mortgage rate is. That is not a character flaw exactly, it's just who he is, and it's the reason his mother has always handled things. But then I said, "Did you know about Dr. Otway?" And there was a pause. And he said, "I knew she took her to a doctor sometimes." I said, "Sometimes." He said, "Marlo, she's a nurse's daughter. She takes everybody to the doctor. She took me to a second guy when I was 11 because she didn't like what the first one said about my ankle. It's a thing she does." And that's the moment I stopped arguing, because I finally saw the shape of it. Every single individual piece of this had an innocent explanation that he had already accepted years ago, one at a time, as it arrived. A name, a doctor, a savings account, a church thing, 6 perfectly reasonable facts, each of them absorbed on its own day, none of them ever laid next to each other, which is exactly what happened to me too. I just got a bathtub and he didn't. At about 1 in the morning, he said the sentence that I think about most, which was, "You don't understand what she was like after Iris." I do. I was 6. And then he went to bed. I sat in that kitchen until about 4. And at some point I did the thing where I got out my phone and looked at photographs from the hospital, which I have maybe 6 of. And in one of them, Delphine is holding Ren against her chest in the NICU with the tubes and the tape. And she is looking down at her with an expression I have looked at 100 times and always read as love. It is love. That's what I finally understood, sitting there at 4 in the morning. It's not a mask over something else. It's love. And it's the load-bearing wall of the entire thing. And there is no version of this where you get to separate them. That was the night I understood I was on my own, in my own house. The lawyer's name is Adeline Vasquez Brand, and she does family law, and she's the reason I got through this. She read everything, and then she put her pen down and said, "Okay, I need you to hear the hard part first. The correction process requires a court order. To get a court order, you have to file a petition. The petition has to notice every party named on both records, which means Delphine gets served." And I said, "Fine, good, let her be served." And Adeline said, "Marlo, she's been on a birth certificate for 6 years, and nobody has ever challenged it. In a courtroom, 6 years of an unchallenged record is not nothing. It's called acquiescence, and opposing counsel will say that word about 40 times. I said, "I didn't acquiesce, I didn't know." And she said, "I believe you completely. Now tell me how we prove that a 19-year-old who was on a psychiatric hold in 2020 didn't know what her mother-in-law filed." I sat in that office and understood the trap, which is beautiful, honestly, in the way a very good trap is beautiful. The 11 days are why she could do it, and the 11 days are why nobody would believe I didn't know. I asked Adeline whether we could just, quietly, whether there was a version where I go to Delphine and put it on the table, and she signs whatever needs signing, and it gets fixed in a back office, and nobody ever files anything. She said, "Yes, absolutely. That's the best outcome, and it happens more than people think." Then she said, "How do you think she'd take it?" And I sat there and actually thought about it properly for the first time, not what I wanted her to do, what she would do, and I could see it completely. I could see her face doing the thing it did with the colander. I could see her crying, genuinely, and saying she'd fix it and being so sorry. And I could see her, 4 days later, having spoken to somebody. I said, she'd say yes, and then she wouldn't do it. Adeline said, "Why?" And I said, "Because she doesn't think she did anything." And my lawyer wrote something down and said, "Okay, then we file, and we file first." I want to be honest about the next 9 days because they were the worst part of the whole thing, and there's no drama in them at all. I had to keep behaving normally. Ren went to her grandmother's on the Tuesday and the Wednesday and the Thursday because Adeline told me, correctly, that abruptly cutting contact before we filed would look like exactly what opposing counsel would say it was. So I put my daughter in a car 3 times and waved and went to work and pulled a dog's teeth and came back at 6 and said thank you so much and had a cup of tea in that that kitchen 3 times. I did that 3 times. I threw up after the second one in the clinic bathroom and told my supervisor it was something I ate. We served her on a Thursday. 11 days later, 11, which I noticed, and which I will never be talked out of noticing, Delphine filed a petition for guardianship. It was not thrown together. It was 40 pages. It was organized chronologically. It cited 6 years of the pediatric records at Otway. It cited the savings account as evidence of sustained financial provision. It cited the insurance. It cited the 3 afternoons a week with a log of dates. And it cited the 4 days in 2020 with the intake paperwork attached, because the person who signed the intake paperwork at the psychiatric unit when I could not sign anything was Delphine Cadogan. She had built a 6-year case file, and she had built it out of her own kindness, and every single thing in it was true. There was one more thing in it, at Exhibit 14, and it is the only piece of paper in this entire story where she says out loud what she was doing. It's the new patient intake form from Otway Family Medicine, dated 11 days after Ren was born. Her handwriting. In the box that says reason for establishing care, mother is unwell. I am handling everything for this child. She wrote that in 2020, in a waiting room, as a reason for a 6-year-old's medical file to exist. She never updated it. That practice has been treating my daughter for 6 years on the understanding that the woman bringing her in is her mother, and the reason on file is that I am unwell, present tense, for 6 years. Her own lawyer put it in as evidence of continuity of care. The hearing was the worst hour of my life, and I'm not going to write most of it down. They read the 4 days out loud. Her lawyer said the words believed the infant had been substituted in a room with 11 people in it, and I had to sit there with my hands in my lap while a stranger described the worst thing my brain has ever done to me, in the past tense, as a reason. Delphine was on that stand for 50 minutes, and she was extraordinary, warm, calm. She cried once, and it was real. She said she loved that little girl more than her own life, and I believe that. I have never doubted that for 1 second, including right now. What ended it was one question, and Adeline asked it almost as an afterthought, in a flat administrative voice, right at the end. She said, "Mrs. Cadogan, why does the child have 2 pediatricians?" And Delphine, who had been unshakable for 50 minutes, who had not made one single error, answered it honestly, because she does not think she has done anything wrong. That's the whole thing. That's the entire engine of this woman. She said, because Marlo takes her to Dr. Vance. Iris goes to Dr. Otway. There was a silence in that room that I could feel on my skin, and the judge, who had not spoken in 20 minutes, leaned forward and said, "I'm sorry, say that again." And Delphine said it again. The guardianship petition was denied. The record was amended, not voided. That took 14 months, and it means that for the rest of her life, my daughter's birth certificate has a correction on the face of it. And one day she is going to be 22 and standing at a passport counter, and someone is going to ask her about it. The DA declined to charge. The letter used the words family matter. I have opinions about that which are not printable. Otway Family Medicine self-reported, which they did not have to do, and Delphine is permanently barred from making medical decisions for her. The $14,200 went into a court-supervised account with Ren's actual name on it. Ambrose and I separated for 8 months. We did not divorce. That's a longer story, and it is not finished, and it is not for here. Delphine has supervised contact 4 times a year at a center with a play kitchen in it. She has attended every single one. She arrives early. She brings something. She has never apologized. Not once, to me, in any forum, in writing or out loud. I have stopped waiting for it because I finally understand that she is not withholding it. There isn't one. In her account of her own life, she registered a baby that nobody else was in a condition to register, gave her a name that deserved to exist again, paid for her, took her to the doctor, and got taken to court for it by a girl she saved. That's her story. She'll tell it that way at 80. Ren is 8 now. She knows some of it. Not the 11 days. She'll get those when she's older, and she'll get them from me, on purpose, in a room I picked. Last month, she was doing a worksheet at the table where you write your full name in boxes, 1 letter per box, and she got to the end and counted the empty ones and said, "Mine's short." I said, "It's a good one, though." And she said, "Yeah, it's mine."